Okay, so are there any questions from our audience? So questions that you want to ask directly to our distinguished panel. So here we are in the Slido app. First, what has more effect? The US economic growth or the Fed rate in terms of relating to our stock market? April?
It seems like people are more focused on the Fed rate.
The Fed rate, yes.
Yeah, right now rather than the U.S. economic growth. So, for example, the U.S. dollar kasi diba strengthened in response to the Fed rate cycle. So I think people are more focused on that rather than the U.S. economic growth.
Yes, all right. We have another question. Okay, do you think that the US-China trade war will affect the Fed decision to raise rates further? And how?
There really are a lot of moving parts as far as the Fed rate hike decision is concerned. If I mean, it's not kasi like a while ago, what's more important, economic growth or the Fed rate hike cycle? But then again, may pagka-circular reference yan eh. If economic growth is not very strong, then you will not see the Fed being as aggressive in raising rates. So, I guess what people are waiting for is to see whether the trade war will hurt the economy. If the U.S. economy will not be hurt anyway, even with the trade war, then the Fed will most likely continue to raise rates, because at this stage, the reason why the Fed is quite aggressive in raising rates is because it needs room to cut rates when the economy turns. So we're now seeing a normalization cycle. Yun yung kinatatakutan nila eh, na if they are not able to increase it fast enough and high enough, when the next economic downturn comes about, yeah, they will not be able to respond to it. Mawawalan sila ng isang tool. Yeah.
I think this normalization alone, there's enough pressure for them to hike the rates. From Mr. Vincent, if oil and food, primarily rice, are the primary drivers of increasing inflation, is it necessary for the BSP to increase the rates?
Oh yeah, a while ago kasi, di ba, I showed you also core inflation. Okay, which strips out, talagang sinerch ko yan, is rice and oil part of core inflation? And it is not. So apparently, although oil and rice had a major impact on inflation, there were other factors that were involved that led to higher prices. So talagang, yun lang, the businesses feel like the economy is strong enough such that they can pass on the price increases, higher costs. Yun lang, yun talagang may second round effects. So in that respect, the BSP really has to be more aggressive. In fact, we are more happy that the BSP is aggressive. Kasi remember, during the start of the year, they delayed increasing rates. What happened? Di ba? Mas malaki yung binaba ng market, tapos yung secondary rates, ang laki ng tinaas, due to concerns that inflation would go out of control. And if you read the papers, watch the news, you will hear a lot of foreign investors saying that the BSP is behind the curve, di ba? They need to be more aggressive, take more action. So ganun ang nagiging reaction ng foreign investors. And you've already mentioned how you're so worried about foreign investors selling out of the Philippines. And that's one of the reasons why they are selling out, is because they're worried that inflation will take longer than, to address as a problem. So for us, it's good that the BSP is being more aggressive in addressing the issue.
Okay. Have any more questions, guys? From the audience, in the microphones, there are around 4. Oh, there's another question from Mr. Felipe. What are your insights on SSI, considering its recent development and licensing agreement with Shake Shack? Ano ba
I
yun?
think it's positive. Well, at least I know I'm gonna go to Shake Shack when it opens. But that said, though, that's only one of the many brands that it has. So, marami pa ng iba. So at least that's one positive, for the stock. Right now, I think people are concerned as to whether they can grow their profits sustainably because the story about SSI is they overexpanded a bit and now they're trying to recover.
Okay. Keep those questions flowing in to the Slido app or you can use your microphones. Okay. What is your outlook for GT Cap from Miss Queenie? Thanks.
Okay, GT Cap, I think valuations are already attractive. The problem is, earlier on we talked about catalyst. There seems to be none yet as of this stage because ang nangyari kasi last year because people were anticipating higher excise taxes on automobiles. Nag-front load, lahat ng tao bumili ng kotse last year. So this year, car sales are down. Secondly, the company is affected by higher or the weaker peso because of course automobiles are imported. So it's being hurt from that respect. So maybe next year will be better for the company, but this year probably not.
Okay. What's your take on CLI?
Cebulan Master, no?
Cebulan
CLI, Cebu, yeah. Okay, fundamentally, wala namang problema dito. Earnings are very strong, valuations are very cheap, very good dividend yield. The problem is when you have blue chips trading at more attractive valuations compared to small caps, o mas pinaprioritize ang blue chips. But that said, small caps will have their day as well in the sun. So I think this is a stock that you can hold on to. At least you get some dividends from
It's
it.
also making a pretty decent pattern now, so there seems to be some accumulation going on for CLI. So I don't think it'll take too long to generate some activity.
All right. You can also vote for the questions you like, or directly engage the microphones. All right, from there was a positive funda recommendation on Maxis. What is your technical outlook?
Well, Maxis looks like it's gone through a very sharp decline and it's just trying to be able to build up a much bigger base for its reversal. There has been some signs of it already. So yeah, I think you probably see some recovery gradually over time for Max after its very, very, very sharp decline for the stock. So it looks like the worst is over for Max.
What is the prognosis on Wilcon, both fundamentally, inflation risk, and technically, near all-time high?
Okay, fundamentally, parang okay naman. I think we're not yet seeing the impact of inflation. We're not yet that clear about that. One of the reasons why this stock did very well since the IPO was we were surprised with how strong the margins were for this issue. So noong una, akala namin nag-IPO mahal. Yun pala, the margins would surprise positively. Profits were stronger than expected, leading to the strong share price performance. No, so far so good. We don't have a coverage yet, but we're monitoring the earnings, and they've done well so far.
On the technical front, I think Wilcon has softened. And what I mean by that is, while the rest of the market was actually going through a major correction, Wilcon was holding its pattern quite strongly. And just recently, roughly at the time Jollibee started to break down, Wilcon cracked an important level of support and took everything a notch lower. And so what I think it's going to have to do is it might have to build a wider consolidation base. If you had asked me that question maybe 2 or 3 months ago, it still looked good. But now I think it's softened its stand, so I would anticipate more corrective time because people who bought in the higher end, some of them are unloading some, And I think that's going to output a wider consolidation base for Wilcon. Okay.
All right. There was an opinion from NEDA chief that the shift to our federalism will negatively impact our economy. What's your thoughts on this planned charter change? Interesting.
A very difficult question, actually.
April, if you can answer that, you'll be the next Speaker of the House.
Yeah, I can answer with something, not it's well, the argument kasi, according to mga speakers that I've listened to in mga seminars, kasi yung ibang federalism hindi naman siya okay, sabi nila. Kasi so this means that they will have to depend on their own, but you have some small, I guess, small cities that also don't generate a lot of revenue. So, paano na sila, di ba? So, right now kasi, although of course, the allocation of the funds, siguro yun ang issue nila. Then, of course, say in the South, they want independence. And of course, then you have some political analysts are saying that not all federalist economies are actually successful. Because if you look at maybe mga South Africa, yung mga African examples, magulo sila, di ba? So, it's a mixed bag. It's not 100% perfect, I suppose. Although you also have some that work, like the US or Germany. So, I guess, wala. Nobody knows.
All right, at least in the research that I've encountered.
Edmund, I think a bigger point or context here, I think it might take few years to answer positively or negatively to this question. But the big concern we have is this question of uncertainty. This is what's taking its toll onto our market. Because if you're about to change your political system, right, you're changing a political system to the end we're not sure, right? You may have, it'll be good, the distribution of wealth will be much better. The other camp will say, yep, it could promote warlordism because each guy will have his own kingdom now across the Philippines, and it'll be harder for people to, say, get money from the central government now there's a lot of things that are taking place, but that uncertainty might be what might keep people at bay. And if once that thing is promulgated and it takes 2 to 3 years to lay out appropriately, we're going to be in limbo, for a while until we know how these things work out. So it'd be nice to have a bit more certainty sooner, but until, of course, Philippine politics takes time. Sometimes it's quick, and like I said, speakers change fast nowadays. But I think that period of uncertainty is why maybe our market decided to pull back faster than usual. Right? Because why would somebody want to put a big stake in your market when you're about to change something in a very big way?
What's your outlook for DD? May winky face pa.
Yeah.
What's that, Daredevil?
So, actually, nabawasan na nga yung mga tanong dyan. Di ba dati, consistently, people
Part ng top 10 yan lagi.
Yeah, it's always consistently. But, well, again, valuation-wise, we feel like, tingnan yung market cap, I think it's the same as Robinson's Land. But, the earnings, well, they're saying they're gonna earn that amount. Whereas si Robinsons, kinikita na niya yung earnings ni Double Dragon, pero yung valuation ni Double Dragon, future earnings, which we don't know yet if it's really gonna materialize. And right now, it's still on the heavy capex stage. Pero if you think about the high interest rate environment, Double Dragon is actually vulnerable because it's a highly leveraged company. What if the profits don't materialize the way they want it to be? Then they have so much debts, of course, which increase their cost. So for me, it's still kind of expensive. It's not a safe bet at this stage. I'd rather buy the other property companies.
All right, thanks. Another question from our audience? There are mics, ha? Mawala lang gusto mag-microphone ngayon. Okay. Where do you think the foreign flows are headed? From Cassie Reyes.
There's
Back
been
to the
some
States.
improvement. there's been some improvement, but maybe not as much as what we wanted to see. And again, the drive of more catalyst, I think, is going to be something that people are watching out for. And like for example, people are watching the SONA to see if they could pick up anything new coming from the statements, and much of it was something that was expected. And so now the delivery of the catalyst might be external because we're waiting for reactions from the dollar, from interest rates abroad, and maybe even here, and how the impact would be. So I think the flows might be neutral. And if we're talking about at least to the next 6 months, you'll probably get quite a bit of a jumpy movement into the flows. But until things are a bit more substantial, or maybe valuations are just truly so attractive already, I don't think you'll get a very, very big amount of foreign flows coming in. I think it'll be more graduated.
CLC's price has been badly beaten since IPO date. Do you think it can still recover within the next 12 months? Mr. Felipe.
I think one of the factors also hurting CLC is rising oil price, because they are heavily, one of the major costs is oil. So siguro that's one of the things that you have to take a look at. And well, when it IPO'd, we felt like it was fully valued anyway. Medyo mahal siya talaga. So I guess because people were excited about the to-go business, so they were willing to pay an expensive valuation. But of course, general market weakness, rising oil prices, so it hasn't been good for the company.
Will the approval of Train 2 affect the market index? Will it make it higher or lower?
Train 2 is more controversial compared to Train 1 because they're saying that some of the incentives will be taken out. But I think in general, if you ask the foreign investors, they are more positive on the passage of all train packages, because in general that will allow the government to raise all the revenues that they want to generate, and allow the government to execute on its aggressive infrastructure plan. So I'm more positive rather than negative, but versus Train 1, I think Train 2 is not as exciting.
All right. What is your year-end outlook for MAC, both fundamentally and technically?
Well, fundamentally, the problem with Macro Asia, when we started talking about it last year, it was widely ignored stock. Nobody knew anything about it. It was so cheap. And the earnings last year were very strong because it was the first full year that I think they did an expansion of one of their, hangars, which allowed them to accept more planes. Yeah, the larger planes. I don't even remember. A380s yata no, which are higher margin planes to service. But this year, when the first quarter came about, the earnings actually disappointed. They did not come in as people had anticipated. And not to mention, valuations are already at more than 20 times PE, so priced in na. And then of course, I'm sure you've all heard rumors about potential M&As and about how this M&A will lead to how much valuation, how expensive, ganun. Problem tagal-tagal na natin naghihintay, wala pa yung M&A, di ba? So, I think, coming from a very low base, now you're already at a very high base with people having very high expectations. It's, in my opinion, more vulnerable to a correction rather than it will go up. Or let's say the M&A really materializes. Baka nga maging sell-on news pa yan kasi now what, di ba? It's there already.
Sir?
Well, the technicals seem to be agreeing with that same condition. Right now it's in a reactive stage. And I'm waiting for that stage where it goes through a wind down. So a gradual consolidation first turning around, because I haven't seen it yet. But what's nice is at least the pullback wasn't so extensive. right? So maybe it's trying to weigh out on the prospects as compared to, of course, the poor earnings or the disappointing earnings that it had. But I think wait for it to finish its congestion. After that, I don't think you've seen the last of that just yet.
All right. Due to high inflation and depreciating peso, what is the probability of a rate hike in the next August BSP monetary meeting? Will the PSEI be highly affected?
Yeah, I think most likely the BSP will be raising rates in the August meeting. But that said, I don't think that the market will view this negatively. In fact, I think it's going to be a neutral event in case the BSP does raise rates. It will be a negative event if the BSP does not do anything. But I think most likely the BSP will raise rates.
All right. What's your take on Meralco, despite the gloomy approval of its PSA?
Okay. For Meralco, actually, we don't have any problems despite our not so very positive outlook on power, because what's affecting the power sector is lower selling price and higher costs. But since Meralco is a distribution company, they're not a power generation company, then of course it's not affected, which is why its share price is not going down anyway. But then we feel like because it's expensive, the opportunity to make more is not there fundamentally.
Right, I guess we have room for one more question. Don't worry, guys. If you have entered your question, it's not entertained here. We will find a way to answer your questions either through the groups or through Slido app itself. All right? Any questions? Last question. I have both Bloom and MRP in my portfolio at the same time early this year. MRP is lagging about 30 to 35% behind. Can you explain? We don't work for both companies, by the way. Get up.
Honestly, I never really thought about it. Well, maybe we should just respond to this after we
Sige.
look at it na lang. With,
All right.
I think something in context of what April told you earlier, I said if you want to focus on which issues to pick, start with the better one. So if she said that Bloomberry was the leader of the industry, people are watching Bloomberry to move before they even trade the other gaming stocks. So if you're going to be in that context, I mean, what I would have done if you wanted one is I'll put a heavier stake in Bloomberry and a minor stake in the second one, right? Because if you feel you're going to put 50-50, but remember the other one is much more formidable than the other one, you'll probably get a first response in the first and a follow-through action in the second. So if you want to build a portfolio of the same stock, same industry, just have very much a minor weight into that, so that at least the disappointment, it's not like too much of a nightmare to you later on.
All right, that's all the time we have for the Q&A. Don't worry, if you have your questions put in, we will try to answer them and find a way to give them back to you, either through the groups or through the Slido app itself.